Almost every single anime I've seen has that organization. The Akatsuki from Naruto, the Espada from Bleach, the Phantom Troupe from Hunter x Hunter. You name an anime, it's probably got an evil organization to challenge the good guys. In the case of One Punch Man, that would be the Monster Association. A group of, well, monsters, set to take down the hero world that keeps them from wreaking havoc as they please. But what if, instead of the Hero Association, the monsters had to face a much different threat? What if they came up against one of the most popular anime characters in our modern era, Satoru Gojo? Today, me and my buddy Sage of the Cavs, gotta love the name, will be discussing this hypothetical matchup and seeing how it would go. To start things off, Sage will cover how strong Gojo is, and then we shall go into Gojo versus every prominent member of the Monster Association separately, before moving on to how he would fare against them as a group. And without any further ado, let's get started.
Yeah, so I think whenever we go into sort of how these characters are going to match up against one another, it's really important to cover their scaling. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for having me on, Satri. It's always good. And if you guys are not subscribed to Satri, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But first and foremost, I think covering sort of how Gojo scales is super important, and then also how his abilities operate on a basic level. That way we have an understanding of what exactly the characters in the Monster Association are going to have to overcome. So first and foremost, the speed scaling for JJK in general is super contentious, with a lot of people saying that Mach 3 is super fast in the verse, with a lot of other people saying that light speed is pretty standard for the high-end characters. And I tend to lean in the direction of the higher-end interpretation. And even Gege Akutami has answered in interviews, questions about how the scaling jumps from Mach 3 all the way up to these super high levels. And they were like, yeah, it's kind of weird, but generally agreed that the speed scaling does jump pretty massively. So I will say, again, I'm on that high-end interpretation, and that goes with Gojo as well. And there will be some minor manga spoilers here because we have to use them, but essentially Gojo definitely scales above light speed, and people have calced him all the way up to 7 or 10 times FTL based on the fact that a weaker version of Sukuna than the one that he fought was able to dodge a light speed attack from Kashimo at point blank range, and the distance he covered compared to the distance that the light speed attack covered in the same amount of time has been calced, like I said, to about 7 times light speed. So he's incredibly fast, but the thing is, Gojo's physical speed, while impressive, is not the thing that a lot of people lean on whenever they're talking about how powerful Gojo is. It's his abilities, namely his limitless curse technique. Now, he does have the 6 eyes, which essentially give him the combined powers of Byakugan and Sharingan minus the Genjutsu, with just insane perception that allows for him to see through abilities, understanding abilities just by looking at them. It gives him enhanced perception in combat and all kinds of other things, but really, the infinity is what these characters are going to have to get around. Now, if you guys aren't familiar with JJK, on a very basic level, the limitless curse technique has a few different applications. Infinity is the neutral. It basically means that nobody can touch him, because if they travel through space at him, or an attack travels through space at him, it's detected by its speed, size, and cursed energy, versus equalization, chi, chakra, whatever, and stopped automatically, or slowed down to the point where it appears that it stopped. Then he has the positive application, which is essentially just him pulling things in at a infinite rate, or producing negative space that causes everything around it to close in, and this technique is called blue. And then finally, the negative application is just his red. It's basically just a red laser beam that he fires. Finally, he's able to produce something called hollow purple, where he combines the red and blue techniques to literally rip matter apart. Now, a lot of people consider this to be existence erasure, but that's not technically true. It's described as virtual mass by the editors, which is the same thing that is used to describe the black hole that Yuki is able to produce. So what we can gather from this is the combination of an infinite push and an infinite pull colliding in on itself would basically cause for the matter to be pushed and pulled at such a rate that it rips itself apart, which is essentially atomic dismantling. So that's basically what's going on there. There are ways to counter this, whether it be reinforcement or techniques like domain amplification, but on a basic level, this is all you need to know. Gojo can stop things from coming at him, he can fire a red laser beam, or he can create like a mini black hole that sucks everything into it, and then also he has enhanced perception that should allow for him to see the abilities that his opponents have. That's basically it. Is there anything else that you think needs to be covered on Gojo, or do you want to jump straight into the monster association scaling?
I think we can jump into the monster association and then cover more things for Gojo as they come along. So starting off, we have the 500 or so fodder members of the association, just like demon level monsters and below. They're not really going to be a factor. Maybe they can just be cannon fodder to be thrown at Gojo, but I feel like once 1,000 of them or 100 of them get destroyed, I feel like the rest are just gonna run away no matter what the bosses tell them to do. So in the end, we will be left with the cadres, the executives of the association, as well as one other character, which is Phoenix Man, which also could cause some problems. So starting off, we have Neon and Gums as the bottom cadres. One of them is just a cat that cuts people, and the other is just a big mouth that eats people. So I don't think either one of them is doing anything really. Even if Gojo just stands still, his passive Infinity is just going to block anything they throw at him, and he should be fast enough to catch them with Hollow Purple or Red and just sort of kill them. Moving on, Fear Ugly is also in the same boat, kind of. He's just a physical brute force brawler. Don't worry, we'll get to more interesting characters later, but this guy, he just sort of falls apart. Even if you give him Vomited Fear Ugly, which is a specific circumstance that needs to happen, the acid is not melting through infinity, it's just not, so this guy just also sort of gets fodderized. He has probably somewhat comparable speed to Gojo, maybe a little bit lower, and he just gets completely hard countered.
Yeah, I think the big issue with any of the characters like that are more physical brawlers or use projectile attacks is, again, just how Infinity works. You know, I talked about it already, but essentially anything that moves through space should be stopped by Infinity if it's perceived as a threat, because it is automatic, meaning that it goes on, you know, constantly, 24/7, even while Gojo is asleep. And again, it detects things by their size, speed, and cursed energy, and in Crossverse, you know, any kind of harmful energy. So the acid is just gonna be stopped by Gojo, and realistically, something I could see him do is use blue to just warp it away as well. So there's just nothing that these guys can do. But go on.
So next up, we're gonna cover the other two, the remaining that are kind of boring, and then we'll get into the more interesting ones. So we have Overgrown Rover and Goketsu. One is just a big dog that shoots lasers, and the other is a big martial artist that punches people, so they have very impressive scaling. Physically, they should be more impressive than Gojo, more likely than not, but they're just not really getting through his hacks no matter what. Again, Goketsu is a big guy that punches people, and as Sage said, that's not really gonna work. And same goes for Rover. He shoots energy blasts, which will be detected and just blocked, and then Hollow Purple probably is going to negate Rover's durability. Although I will say, characters in One Punch Man do have some level of resistance to atomic attacks based on the fact that Atomic Samurai, a guy who can cut things on an atomic level, doesn't really cut a robot that is weaker than these people. So you could say that maybe it would have some level of resistance to Hollow Purple, but the thing is, Hollow Purple is a much higher level of atomic dismantling than the atomic slashes are, so I feel like that's just not really gonna work out.
Yeah, well, and even if Gojo, even if his Hollow Purple fails, right? Like, even if Rover just has insane durability, we know that, again, you know, manga spoilers, I'm sorry, Sukuna was able to survive being hit by 2 Hollow Purples. He did say that if he got hit by a 100% Hollow Purple at a close range, it would be fatal, but then he does survive one. So, well, what does that tell us? It tells us he probably used some sort of reinforcement or maybe domain amplification to take some heat off of it. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that Rover is able to, you know, just tank it durability wise and resist the, you know, deatomization effect that Hollow Purple brings on. Gojo has another ability that I didn't talk about that will become more important later on in this video, but even right now, he could just use his domain expansion, Infinite Void, which essentially just like traps the opponent in a barrier and then floods their mind with infinite sets of infinite information, leaving them in a vegetative state. So he could literally just fry his mind, and there's nothing he can really do about it.
Yeah, Rover has dog-level intelligence, so he's probably not figuring out counters to any of Gojo's stuff, much less domain expansion. So now moving on to somebody that is actually kind of interesting to talk about, Elder Centipede. Now, this guy doesn't really have a way to get through infinity. However, Elder Centipede is absolutely insane vitality-wise. Something I haven't mentioned in videos, I've hyped him up quite a lot in videos recently, but something I haven't mentioned yet is that he gets his entire inside blasted out by Geno's paws, and he straight up gets his brain blasted out. You can see lasers coming through his eye sockets. He is gone. His entire brain is dead, and he's still able to regenerate from it. So I feel like Gojo would have a very hard time actually getting rid of him, because let's just say Hollow Purple destroys its face. It could probably still regenerate because it doesn't need a brain to regenerate, so it probably can just return. Like, the only thing that killed Elder Centipede was a punch from Saitama that completely erased him head to toe. So this might actually be kind of tough to take down.
Yeah, so from what it appears to me is that Elder Centipede needs to be completely eviscerated in order to be taken down, and based on the size of Elder Centipede, I don't see that happening. We do see that the maximum Hollow Purple that he uses in Chapter 235 is able to like completely level a city block, like decimate buildings around it, evaporate materials, but that's not gonna do anything because like that city block is like the size of Elder Centipede's head. So it's even if you argue that he hits him with that, which he probably would, it's not putting him down. So this is gonna be another case where I think Gojo's mind hacks is gonna come into play, where he's just going to have to use domain expansion and fry Elder Centipede's brain.
Yeah, and something really interesting, this could definitely work. But at the same time, Elder Centipede did have his brain destroyed and still regenerated, so how does him having a dead brain inside of him work? Because if he's just a vegetable and he just, like, his body just stops functioning and just falls to the ground and just doesn't move at all, then it's definitely a win condition for Gojo. But what if, like, it just regenerates a new brain? Like, if his body just reacts instinctively, that could be something.
Yeah.
But it's really weird to talk about. Like, this is why this is so interesting, because, like, ordinarily, Elder Centipede should just die to domain expansion. But again, like, he straight up regenerated his brain after it got completely blasted, so it's kind of weird.
Yeah, and I would say that, if the domain expansion doesn't put him down, there's a good chance that Elder Centipede might be able to bring down Gojo, unless you argue that Gojo could, like, charge up the projectile form of his Hollow Purple and, like, get Elder Centipede to charge at him in a straight line or something, and then just, like, fire it and, cause it to just rip through him from head to tail, I guess. If he does that, then maybe that could work, but, and I wouldn't put it past Gojo. It does seem like he has some level of control as to, where the Hollow Purple, the blue, and the red go. Like, he's got a pretty good amount of control over the direction of it, so you might even be able to argue that he could fire the Hollow Purple and then just, like, control it to weave its way through Elder Centipede from head to toe. But, I do feel like that's a little bit of a stretch, so definitely let us know in the comments what you guys think. I lean in the direction of Gojo being able to win here, whether it be from domain expansion or from a controlled Hollow Purple. But he's definitely not putting him down with just a basic blue or red, and he's certainly not putting him down with, like, just a standard purple that just explodes. So definitely let us know. I lean in the direction of Gojo, probably like 6 or 7 times out of 10, but I'm open to being swayed.
Yeah, I like what you said about the controlled Hollow Purple, because I feel like that's what would happen in the end. I think Elder Centipede doesn't really have a way to put Gojo down either way, because he doesn't really have any counters for Infinity. So, best case scenario for the monsters, he's just sort of around even after the battle is over. Like, if, hypothetically, Gojo kills everybody else, we'll get to if he could or not, but hypothetically, if he kills everybody else and Elder Centipede is the only one left, he's just sort of standing around and it's just kind of a stalemate, but more or less I would imagine that what Sage said would happen, where Gojo just sort of shoots a controlled hollow purple through his body and eventually just kills him that way.
Yeah, and I think, like, if that doesn't put him down, like you said, it probably does just end up being a stalemate, because Elder Centipede, like you said, has insane vitality, but so does Gojo. Gojo has some of the highest cursed energy levels in the entire world in JJK, but also has by far the most efficient, so he's able to compete with somebody like Sukuna, who has more cursed energy than Yuta, who has more cursed energy than Gojo, and Gojo doesn't really get fatigued. Like, the only reason why he ever has any issues is because he uses Domain over and over again. But yeah, I mean, I see it either coming out with, you know, maybe you could argue like Elder Centipede wins a war of attrition if they fight for like days on end or something. But outside of that, I don't really see a solid win condition for him.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So moving on, next up is going to be somebody that's quite a bit less interesting to talk about than Elder, I believe. It's going to be Black S. This guy is basically just...
Hey, what's the S stand for, bro?
This guy is basically just the definition of a one-man army, because he has 66 trillion of himself just sort of running around the battlefield. But like, what are any of them gonna do? That's the question, because none of them can get through Darkshine's just muscles, just pure muscular physique. So I don't see any of the Black S bodies getting past infinity. And then at the same time, you can argue that if Gojo acts fast enough, he could just nuke any bodies out of existence before they can multiply more. Because it's never really been depicted in the manga, so we don't know how that would go down exactly. But I imagine that if Black S just enters the battle, and then all of his bodies just get destroyed before he can multiply, I feel like that's kind of the end for him. So Gojo probably has the win against Black S.
Yeah, no, I would say that's exactly right. I mean, we do see Gojo use domain expansion on multiple targets at once whenever he uses them against all of the cursed spirits in the subway. So we know he can expand the range of his domain expansion and just like fry the brains of multiple people. We also know that he's able to use whenever he's fighting Toji. He's able to use this version of Blue where he kind of just like warps everything around him into it. And what people don't like, people kind of sleep on Blue, dude, because like it's literally him creating negative space and causing the space around it to collapse in on itself. So it's kind of like a less advanced form of like Kakashi's Kamui. It's just absolutely busted. So, and these guys, like, they don't have great durability, so I could legitimately see him just using Blue, spinning it around him, and just ripping them all to shreds pretty quickly. Now, if they do multiply, that's obviously going to be more of an issue for Gojo, but they all scale like pretty low in comparison, so he could just go one by one and rip their domes off if he really, really needed to.
Yeah, for sure. These guys all scale to like, at most, relativistic, or maybe 1 to 2 times FTL. Now, their reaction speed is cracked because Black S can perceive Cosmic Garo and whatnot, but that's just reaction speed. In terms of actual combat speed, they're really, really slow compared to even some of the lesser cadres. And then, in terms of Golden S appearing and even Platinum S, if it comes down to that, then it gets a little bit more interesting, because both Golden and Platinum should be faster than Gojo, especially Platinum, because he consistently scales 20 to 30 times the speed of light. But at the same time, going with the higher ends of Gojo scaling, which is the more interesting scaling for this video, so we're definitely going with that. So, going with the higher ends of Gojo scaling, Platinum wouldn't be completely speed blitzing him. He would be outspeeding them pretty badly, but he wouldn't be perception blitzing him.
Yeah.
And either way, what is Platinum going to do against Infinity? Like, he just punches and kicks, which are attacks that travel through space. So, I feel like Platinum just doesn't really have a win con.
Yeah, well, and I would also say, like, a lot of people don't talk about this, but Gojo can expand the range of his Infinity. Like, the standard range is about 3 meters, but he can expand it if he needs to. So, if he's having trouble reacting to this guy, like, say at Gojo, we take that 7 times FTL calc, and let's say that Platinum S is 20 times. That's almost a 3 times, speed discrepancy, which is super impressive, but it's also like the standard blitz tier is somewhere between like 4 and 7 times greater than your opponent, so he's not really getting into that blitz tier level. So Gojo would still be able to react to him, but even if he's having trouble reacting to him, he could just expand the range of his infinity to where Platinum just can't get close enough to him to do anything, and it gives him more space and time to be able to react to this guy. We also see that Gojo is able to track people based on their cursed energy, and if we're doing verse equalization, obviously he should be able to track him based on his energy. So I don't see any reason why he would have an issue reacting to him. And then at that point in time, it's just going to come down to the fact that Gojo can keep up infinity as long as he needs to, and he's never going to get tired from it. But Platinum S will run out of energy before Gojo does, and even if he just starts to get a little bit tired and slow down just a little bit, any of Gojo's attacks, whether it be Domain Expansion, Hollow Purple, Blue, or Red, should be able to do sufficient damage to at least significantly wound Platinum, or maybe even take him down.
Yeah, I would agree, because if you want to get edgy with Platinum scaling, you can get him to that multi-continental range, but at the same time, how is that faring against literal, like, almost reality warping, like, just warping matter entirely? I feel like that probably bypasses durability, at least to some extent, and I feel like the only thing that Platinum S could maybe do is if he just grabbed a chunk of Earth beneath Gojo and then just chucked it into space. Maybe then he could do that, but maybe then he could get the W. But it's not really in character, he's never really shown anything like that. The only character that really does that in One Punch Man is Boros, with, my Chad, but anyway, Platinum S doesn't really do that.
Even if he does that at the same time, Gojo can teleport. So it's like, if he picks up this, massive piece of Earth beneath him and tries to throw it into space, Gojo would recognize this and literally just teleport. So I don't even know if that would be a legitimate win con, unless you argue that he throws him with perception blitz levels of speed or something, but I don't really think that that's really happening.
And now moving on, another character that is kind of interesting to talk about is Evil Natural Water. Now, Evil Natural Water, I will say right now, he just gets Hollow Purpled out of existence. But if the fight takes place near an ocean and Evil Ocean Water comes out, he fuses with the ocean and just becomes this massive entity that's just by existing has been calced to multi-continental, just for sustaining that much water. I feel like that's gonna be a lot better. And the thing that people don't realize about Evil Ocean Water is that even in his massively, massively weaker state as just Evil Natural Water, he's able to react to attacks from Garo, who at that point is very much a speedster in the series, nearing Platinum S, not quite there, but nearing that level. And we straight up have confirmation that the more moisture and the more water absorbs, the faster he gets. So imagine the difference between him being like, I don't know, 10 cubic meters of water, or like 20, 50 cubic meters, to like thousands.
Yeah, no, that's crazy.
At least.
That's crazy.
So if it's like a linear increase, I don't know if it is, because this guy wasn't around for very long, but if that is the case, he might actually low-key be the fastest member of the Monster Association by miles, and there's not really any anti-feats for that, but at the same time, even if that is the case, he's still not getting past Gojo's Infinity. But at the same time, Gojo has a really hard time killing this guy. So you want to go into that?
Yeah, so I think that, so again, like you said, natural water probably getting eviscerated. But if he merges with the ocean, that could be a massive problem, because, while Gojo does have some pretty good AoE inverse for JJK with his Hollow Purple he's able to use in Chapter 235, it's not anywhere near what it needs to be in order to deal with somebody of that size. So, I mean, to me, I'm like, the only real win conditions I could see here would be, number one, he's able to hit him with a domain expansion, and you would have to argue that because his sentience is spread out through every water molecule that he's infused with, right? So you would have to argue that hitting one portion of water's sentience would also affect the rest of its sentience, and that's kind of difficult to argue. So I mean, that could be a win condition if you accept that. But the only other win condition would be like if he just nukes, you know, a bunch of different spots with hollow purple or something, but I don't really think that that's going to work either. So the way that I see this going, to be honest with you, is like they just duke it out for a long time, like a couple days or something, and then eventually either Gojo loses a war of attrition or they just both agree like, all right, this is a stalemate.
They just battle to the heat death of the universe.
Yeah, just till the end of time.
The sun turns into a red giant and just evaporates the water, so Gojo wins.
Well, because here's the thing, too, like, Yuta straight up says that Gojo cannot run out of cursed energy, so it's a real possibility that he can just fight as long as he needs to, but I mean,
bro, like it's actually until the sun just turns big enough to just evaporate the water.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, maybe you could argue that, you know, if he uses his maximum cursed output or something, he could do a significant amount of damage over time. But like even Saitama couldn't really put this thing down because of how massive it is and how, you know, sort of hacks it is that it can infuse with the ocean and you know, spread itself out so far. So, I mean, I actually lean in the direction of Gojo potentially losing this because even though I don't think that a water would be able to get past infinity, I think that just a war of attrition would probably go in his favor because, I mean, Gojo's got to eat at some point in time, you know?
Yeah, but at the same time, like, I don't know, this is so weird because, okay, domain expansion, firstly, how sentient is evil ocean water? He can devise a little bit of a strategy against Child Emperor at one point, but other than that, we just know that it reacts on instinct and attacks anything with killer intent. That's all we know. And this guy has so little screen time as ocean water because this thing was literally so OP that he appears and the next chapter Saitama has to come in to kill it, because it's just that strong, so...
Yeah, no, that's great.
We don't even know how much it can really do, we don't know the speed entirely, we don't know how spread out its conscience is or whatnot, but it did get completely eviscerated. Like, I imagine the punch from Saitama probably, like, didn't just blow the water away, it probably evaporated it, because it was a serious punch, so it was probably a very, very severe level of destruction, and I'm not sure, like, is domain expansion really catching that big of an area? Probably not.
Yeah.
Hollow Purple is weird, like, if he just spams it like a machine gun, maybe at some point he could finish water off, but, like, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, but it's like, if he's fused with an entire ocean of water, like, this genuinely, like, this is the only, because this is the only way that I could see this Gojo actually winning, and it's kind of dumb, but I mean, it genuinely could happen this way. Because Gojo's Infinity is running 24/7 around the clock, even while he's sleeping, like, if you argue that he just has to eliminate every molecule of water that this thing has, he has to essentially destroy an entire ocean. What Gojo could do is use Hollow Purple 3-4 times, starts to get a little bit tired, teleport away, grab some food, munch, teleport back. Now he's just like, I gotta sleep, you know, and he can fly, you know, so he's like sleeps in the air, and, you know, the whole time Ocean Water's just like launching attacks and stuff at him. He wakes up, okay, time to get back to work, launches another like 10 Hollow Purples, eliminates a bunch more water, and like just over the course of like several weeks, just takes out every molecule of water there.
just years until the oceans run dry.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like, do we really think that Gojo is going to be like, yeah, this is a good idea to destroy an entire ocean and shift the climate like this, you know? Like, I don't know, dude.
The Gojo's gonna do the monster's job for them. He's ending humanity.
Yeah. So I'm like, I think that realistically, the only real win con he has is either doing something goofy like that, which, I mean, honestly, in the world of One Punch Man, that's not even ridiculous. So
yeah,
I think
bro,
that
One Punch Man is a series where we have like stripper monsters and whatnot. So,
yeah. So I'm like, this is not something that I would put past them to do. But it's just, this is just what is that? An unstoppable force meets an immovable object, and
yeah,
I'm not sure. I think eventually they would just be like, all right, this is pointless.
Yeah. But again, this is if evil ocean water comes out. This is if it's near an ocean.
Yeah.
If it's just evil natural water, it just gets hollow purpled instantly and then just dies.
Eviscerated. And honestly, you could even argue that maybe he could expand his, because he can expand the range of his domain as well. And but natural water wouldn't have any way of actually like countering that. So you could just argue that he encapsulates the entire thing in his domain, and one-shot domain expansion might do it. Hollow Purple's definitely doing it. So yeah, it's really just if he gets to merge with the ocean, it becomes a real problem.
Yeah. Alright, then moving on to, honestly, the most viable win condition the monsters have. It's gonna be Psykos, the only non-monster on the Monster Association. So, basically, what she can do is use Psychokinesis, which is gonna be extremely bad for Gojo, because this stuff appears on you instantly. Like, Tatsumaki just straight up extends an arm toward you, and then you're dead. Psykos, by Tatsumaki's own admission, is extremely skilled and uses her powers in very refined ways. And Psykos actually manages to make Tatsumaki break a sweat, which is an insane feat for Tatsumaki. To make Tatsumaki break a sweat is already insane. So like, we have this Esper, who is also narratively implied to be above Elder Centipede and Rover and Gyoketsu, because she thinks suppressed Tatsumaki can beat Elder Centipede, and then she thinks she can beat suppressed Tatsumaki. So, we just have this extremely powerful Esper, who probably has the attack potency to kill Gojo, and actually has attacks that just straight up spawn on him instantly and kill him potentially. So, I feel like this is the most viable win condition, especially if you take into consideration that these Espers can actually attack people's insides as well. Like, we see Tatsumaki straight up remove a needle from inside Fubuki. So imagine if they were actually bloodlusted, they could straight up just grab Gojo's heart and crush it. Specifically Psychos, Tatsumaki's not a part of this discussion, but like hypothetically, it should be something that can go down, because we never see this energy traveling through space. We see other forms of it traveling, like whenever the Espers use lasers or barriers, but in terms of just their pure psychokinesis, when they just crush things, we never actually see it travel at all. Like, it just instantly appears on a target. So what do you think? Is this capable of getting past infinity?
Yeah, I think it definitely should be, because, here's the issue. Like you said, it doesn't travel. And Gojo's honestly kind of broken in cross-verse stuff most of the time, because, like, for example, I did a video on him versus every Naruto villain, and in the Itachi section, I was like, dude, in order for Genjutsu to work, it's straight up stated that they pour their chakra from their eye into the eye of the other person, and the word that they use there actually, like in the original Japanese, actually implies a traveling of chakra. So Genjutsu should not work against him, but this isn't Genjutsu. This is literally her using like the force essentially to like capture him in her grasp. And so because it doesn't travel, it should bypass infinity. We were talking about this before the call, kind of going over these matchups and stuff, or before the recording, and one of the things that we sort of pointed out that might be a win con for Gojo is like his Six Eyes. In the latest chapter, he's talking about, there's a flashback to him talking to Miguel, and he basically says he can tell how Miguel's curse technique works just by looking at him. So maybe you could argue that he could just look at her and be like, oh, this is what she can do. That's really dangerous. Let's teleport behind her and hit her with a domain expansion, or let's fire off a red or whatever. Let's move around really fast. There's a bunch of different things that he might be able to do, but at the end of the day, like, she's got light speed plus reaction time, so he's not outspeeding her, and keeping out of her range. Again, her attack doesn't travel through space, so it directly bypasses infinity. And also, there's something that you talked about, before we started recording, about her, even if she crushes his heart and maybe he feigns being dead and uses RCT on his heart, that wouldn't even work, right? Because she might be able to sense life force. You kind of want to go into that?
Yeah, so these espers, they can just straight up sense life signatures, because like Tatsumaki, we see whenever the heroes are approaching the monster association, she can literally just sense where the monsters are hiding behind the buildings and whatnot. And there's another moment in the battle between Psykos Orochi's nerfed form and Tatsumaki and all the other heroes, where Tatsumaki just straight up sees them moving through several buildings and underground. She's like high up in the sky, looking down at the ground, and she just straight up sees them moving underground. She sees their exact positions. So they can just straight up track living beings and their life force, or at least their energy. And if she sees that Gojo's corpse is right there, but it's still full of energy and life force, Psykos is probably gonna be like, nah, this guy's playing, let's crush his head or something like that. Maybe that'll work. So I feel like that definitely shouldn't be able to work, just feigning death. At the same time, if Gojo just straight up teleports behind Psykos and instantly unleashes a domain, he should probably be able to win. But do you think that's in character for him to do? That's like the thing.
No, I definitely don't. Now, again, I do think that Gojo is super smart. He's got one of the best battle IQs in the entire series, but he also likes to play with his food a bit. Like there are multiple times in a lot of his fights, especially some of the recent ones, where he should have been able to end the battle way quicker than he did, but for a variety of reasons, one of which being he just plays around too much, the fights went on longer than they should have. So I think that even in a scenario where, if we're assuming, because it says that he can kind of get a general idea of how their abilities work by looking at them, so even if we assume that he sees her and she realizes that she has, psychokinesis, maybe he doesn't understand how good it is, but even if we assume that he does know how good it is, it's like, he's kind of an arrogant character, so I don't really know if he's just going to go for the teleportation, domain expansion combo, and even if he does, she might be able to sense him behind her and use the psychokinesis before he forms the hand sign to unleash the domain. So I just don't really see a viable way in which he beats her, unless you think that he's just like, I gotta end this immediately, teleport domain, but again, I don't think it's in character, but it is a potential win con. So I guess I would say like she would win 9 times out of 10, with the 1 out of 10 being Gojo fighting out of character and just ending it quickly.
Yeah, I think I agree. Because another thing you mentioned is like sensory capabilities for Psykos. I want to address, these espers do have sensory capabilities as long as they're focused. Because we see when they're focused, they can just sense their opponents and whatnot. If they're distracted, that's when it becomes more difficult, because we see this with Tatsumaki. When she has to save other heroes, she fails to notice an attack incoming from Psykos Orochi. But if they are focused on the opponent, which is definitely going to be the case here, then I feel like Psykos should definitely be able to keep track of Gojo through not only eyesight but also sensory capabilities. And just to talk about Psykos' speed real quick, a lot of people think that she doesn't really have any speed feeds, but she definitely does, because we know she at least scales to suppress Tatsumaki. A similar Tatsumaki could react to Sonic in the manga, and, well, everything is in the manga, so I don't know why I said that, but suppressed Tatsumaki can react to Sonic, who can later go on to fight Flashy Flash, competitively to some degree. Like, it's not a full power of Flashy Flash, but even while suppressed, Flashy is still faster than Light by a good margin, by several times. So yeah, Psykos definitely does have pretty good speed. And you can go into this as well, there's like... And I can also go into just the sheer scaling chain that One Punch Man has, where Genos is able to react to light over a distance, and it's stated to have the properties of light, and he straight up dodges the lasers. And then he gets an upgrade, he gets stronger and presumably faster too. He fights a super fatigued Garo, then that Garo gets healed and gets a Zenkai boost on top of that. He fights some monsters, the monsters can react to him. and then they dice him up, and then he gets back up, he heals, and then after that healing he gets another Zenkai boost and he's able to just straight up blitz the monster that was reacting to him previously. And then this Goro fights Rover, gets even stronger and faster, fights Orochi is specifically stated to be getting faster, and then he is still below most of the cadres, and Psykos is literally like the strongest cadre. So I feel like Psykos is definitely more than a couple times faster than Light at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I think it would genuinely, based on a lot of her scaling and the scaling chain you presented, with Gojo being at somewhere around 7 to 10 times FTL in terms of combat speed, you could make a legitimate argument that she might actually be approaching or eclipsing a Blitz tier above him. And so if that's the case, then he genuinely has no chance. You know, if you wanted to argue that Gojo may not even be able to get to her, I wouldn't be super opposed to that. So, yeah, I think long story short, Gojo just has one potential win con, and it's super out of character, and it's totally reliant on the idea that she wouldn't be able to react to him teleporting behind her. So, yeah, it's not looking good for my boy Gojo.
Yeah, so I do agree. I'm sorry to say this, but I don't think Gojo's got this one. Especially if you put him in the situation the heroes were in originally, because Psykos literally had intel on the heroes and legit matched them up against their worst counters. Like, she put Atomic Samurai, the guy that cuts people, against the guy that multiplies when being cut. So, it's just gonna be pretty bad for Gojo if she just knows some stuff he can do. She probably wouldn't know everything, but like, let's say she knows the basics, she knows about Infinity and whatnot. She's probably just gonna be like, okay, Orochi, can you distract him while I, like, crush his heart or whatnot? Like, just to be completely safe, just so I don't have to face him head on. Actually, she doesn't even have to face him head on, because she has the Goro flesh puppet. She has that, one-eyed fleshy creature that can't even feel pain, and he's straight up just a flesh puppet for her, so she can literally have 2 chances at beating Gojo. So yeah, it's just not gonna go too well for Gojo, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it's bad.
Yeah, so now moving on, we have the Monster King Orochi. Now this one is also pretty interesting. So Orochi, his main deal is he is just this giant force who no doubt scales way higher in terms of attack potency, but in terms of just sheer physical speed, you can make the argument that Gojo might be able to react. But at the same time, Orochi in base is just Psykos, maybe even faster, so that's kind of up in the air. But at the same time, Orochi doesn't really have any win conditions against Gojo's Infinity, because he mostly just fires lasers and uses various dragon heads and martial arts and whatnot, and his horn attacks to just pierce people through. And Gojo is not getting done in by any of that. The only thing I will say is that Orochi is stated to be just a prodigy 1 level below Garo. And Garo, right before his battle with Orochi, where that is stated, he straight up goes up against Rover, and Rover is about to blast him to death. Like, Garo straight up sees the afterlife almost. And then he just adapts to the heat of the attack and then just instantly recovers. Like, he just tanks it. So he just adapted to a one-shot increase pretty much. And then right after that, he gets binded by Goro and then just adapts to her psychokinesis and starts moving. So if Orochi's adaptability is anywhere near this level, you could potentially make the argument that he might be able to adapt to Infinity. Like, you might be able to say that he's just sort of like a nerfed Maharaga in this case, in terms of just pure adaptability. But at the same time, it is kind of headcanon. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, adapting to Infinity is something that is really interesting, because what is Infinity? Infinity is literally spatial manipulation. So what he is literally doing is he is causing anything that enters a certain space to slow down the closer it gets to him. So he's the idea of Infinity is kind of creating fractions in space that people have to travel through. So it's that idea of, if you were going to cover a certain distance, you have to first cover half that distance, and then you have to cover half that distance, and then you have to cover half that distance. And eventually, if you just continue covering half that distance, you never actually reach your destination. So that's sort of what it is in real life, though, is like he's creating this paradox in real life of you can never actually get to him. So none of the physical attacks, none of the lasers, none of that will ever get to him. I know a lot of people have argued that lasers should work on him because Miguel says that he operates it, or his Limitless operates on an atomic level, and obviously lasers are made of photons, so they're subatomic. But it also stated that it directly detects things based on their size, speed, and cursed energy. So anything, obviously cross-verse, anything that is an energy-based attack that is moving at a quick speed and has any type of size to it is going to be detected. So it should stop it. But if he's able to adapt to infinity, that becomes a real problem. But again, it's like, how do you adapt to that technique? Like, how do you actually get around it? Because even Mahoraga wasn't fully capable of adapting to infinity. Mahoraga was able to essentially, or Sukuna was able to essentially use Mahoraga's adaptation ability to figure out how to get around it himself. But he wasn't actually able to get around it without using something like domain amplification, which obviously Orochi doesn't have. So I'd be hard-pressed to say that Orochi can adapt to it or get around it, which would then just lead to Gojo having the upper hand. And if he has the upper hand, something like a hollow purple to Orochi's face or through his chest, because like you pointed out before the recording, Saitama flies through his chest and nearly kills him, so sufficient damage to his chest and or head should be able to do the job. And it's like, do you think that even if he can adapt to it, that he would adapt to it in time? Or do you think Gojo is actually putting him down first? And like, to me, I think Gojo would put him down before he's able to adapt, if he's able to.
Yeah, I would agree. The only thing is, again, the speed. Like, you can get Orochi to this blitz tier above, and if that is the case, then he could dodge Hollow Purple and whatnot. But then Domain Expansion, whenever he's up close to Gojo, and that's probably the end of Orochi. Because Orochi still used to be a normal human, and then he turned into this monster, but his brain is still, like, you can say human, but more advanced. But then, like, Infinity is just... not Infinity. Domain Expansion, Limitless, is still just gonna pretty much fry his brain no matter what, and turn him into a vegetable. So, if that happens, then Orochi definitely loses still.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that because he is sentient and because he has a brain to be fried, the Domain Expansion should work. Hollow Purple should work. So even though Orochi is like arguably the strongest person here, like he's super powerful, it's just like his moveset it's not compatible with what he would need in order to actually bring down somebody like Gojo.
Yeah, agreed. So now moving on, there's this one last character that we mentioned before, it's Phoenix Man. Now Phoenix Man is kind of weird because in terms of just pure physicality, at first he's not really that strong, but then whenever Gojo kills him the first time, he's just gonna resurrect and become several blitz tiers and several one-shot tiers stronger, because we see he goes from like smashing his beak against a shield from Child Emperor and just completely just destroying himself, to just slamming through 5 of them and turning them to dust with minimal effort. So the gap is pretty big, and if Gojo kills him like 2 or 3 times, then he could also turn into like a Platinum S type character who could just like run laps around him. But at the same time, he doesn't really have a win condition still, so Gojo might have difficulty taking him down, but at the same time he doesn't really have anything to take down Gojo. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, honestly, in character, Gojo's just going to, like, try to scrap with him, and obviously he wouldn't be able to touch him, so Gojo's just going to juggle him around, and then in character, Gojo's not going to use Domain Expansion off rip. He's probably just going to like beat him up and then maybe use, blue or red or something. If he uses red, he decimates him and then goes to walk away, but then Phoenix Man obviously revives and now he's stronger. So I think at that point, Gojo's probably going to try to use Domain Expansion and then do something like what he did with Jogo and, like, you know, take his head off. And if that doesn't work, then the next time around they fight, obviously, I think at that point in time, Phoenix Man's just going to be way faster and way stronger, but again, have no way around Infinity. So that's where he probably uses Hollow Purple. And we've never seen him come back from, like, complete deatomization. So I think that should do the trick. If you want to argue that he can come back from that, then, I mean, it's just a rock in a hard place, you know, an unstoppable force, immovable object, there's nothing that can be done. But I personally think that deatomization from Hollow Purple should work. Are you sort of on that same page?
Yeah, I do agree. And I also think that domain expansion, if Gojo doesn't rip his head off, Gojo style, you know, Jogo style, it's still just gonna fry his brain. Like, if Gojo doesn't kill him and only fries his brain, then that's kind of it for Phoenix Man, because he's just gonna be like just a chicken just a vegetable. So yeah, it's just gonna end badly. He's not gonna resurrect from that. He's just gonna be a non-factor anymore. So yeah, I think Phoenix Man also gets dealt with pretty consistently.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And honestly, something that you might be able to do as well, which I know, like, this is definitely not something I would ever argue in a debate or anything, because it's I don't know, it's really grimy. But if you argue that, like, BFR isn't necessarily a lose condition, the Inverted Spear of Heaven is something that later on in the series Gojo should have access to, because they would have taken it back to Jujutsu High. So if this dude just keeps regenerating like that, be like, all right, hold up, teleport to Jujutsu High, grab the Inverted Spear of Heaven, teleport back, and then stab him with it. And what it does is it cancels curse techniques. So if, you know, crossverse, it would just cancel his ability to revive. So I think that, you know, that might be a win condition, but again, it's grimy. It's like, okay, well, then if they can just, like, leave and go get items, then, you know, what are we talking about? But yeah, I think at the end of the day, Hollow Purple should do the trick. And, you know, if you don't, then nobody wins, and, you know, Phoenix Man just keeps getting more and more powerful as they go.
So overall, either Stalemate or Gojo still wins. And yeah, that's it for the 1v1s pretty much, because everybody else isn't really relevant. So what we have here is Platinum S being fast enough to just sort of run around him. Like, if you apply that same scaling chain that I applied to Psykos and Orochi to Platinum S, you can get him even higher. So if it's just via calcs, Platinum isn't actually blitzing Gojo, but if it's via scaling chains, he definitely should be. So we have Platinum S, who is blitzing around but can't really damage Gojo. We have Elder Centipede, who is gonna be very hard to kill, but is not gonna be able to do that much to Gojo. We have Psykos, who can kill Gojo, and might be able to do it one-on-one. We have Orochi, who is at least going to be a solid distraction and last a while. And then we have Phoenix Man, who might also be a solid distraction, and pretty much everybody else just sort of gets erased out of existence. Ocean water, if it comes out, could be a problem, but again, it's that specific conditions near an ocean, so it's kind of weird to talk about. So, if all these guys are together, what do you think happens? Like, if Gojo actually just strolls in and just takes on the entire association?
You know, honestly, the fact that Psykos is on that team is a real problem for him still, because she should be able to beat him by herself. But if you just, like, remove her from the group, I mean, you might have a scenario where Gojo, as long as you know, the normal water doesn't turn into ocean water, you might have a scenario where Gojo might be able to solo them, to be honest with you. As long as you remove the ocean water aspect and you remove Psykos, I don't see a win condition that they have, because they're all just getting, like, bodied by Hollow Purple. And yeah, I mean, what about you? Are you sort of on the same page? Like, Psykos seals the deal for me, but outside of her, I don't really see them doing anything.
Yeah, Psykos is definitely...
Unless you, dude, I mean, unless you say that Orochi, like, absorbs all of the rest of them, that could be a problem.
Yeah, because he should be able to do that. Obviously, the monsters wouldn't allow that, so then, like, the monsters start fighting Orochi, so it's a battle royale at that point. But if you say that Orochi, like, absorbs Platinum S and everybody else, and you just give him Phoenix Man's resurrection and his own adaptability, he basically has infinite time to adapt, and then at some point he might be able to crack infinity, who knows? But other than that, I feel like Elder Centipede is gonna be super hard to kill, but he's not doing anything.
Yeah.
Platinum S or Orochi could possibly throw Gojo into space if you argue Blitztier is above Gojo, which isn't really that hard to argue. Like, you can make the argument, especially for Platinum S, because he's just an even faster version of the scaling chain for Orochi and Psykos, because he's several more Garos up the chain. So you just get this character that, in character, probably isn't gonna do it, but at the same time, like, if he sees that nothing else is working, he might just resort to chucking Gojo into space.
Yeah, and I mean,
so I feel like that's the only win condition they have.
Yeah, if he does, that could be a problem. But again, like we talked about earlier, like, he could just teleport. So, you know, I don't know, dude. I'm just like, I don't see them having a legitimate win con. Like, I mean, maybe if Orochi fuses with everybody, then he could just, like, you know, wear him down and eventually get the win con via war of attrition. But I don't know, man. I lean towards Gojo if Psykos isn't there, and if, you know, we don't have an ocean water problem. But if those two are there and like at full power, then there's just no way he's winning.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, Gojo can solo. Again, like, maybe the chucking into space, maybe, but like, overall, Gojo might solo if it wasn't for those two really big problems, specifically Psykos. Because especially if they're all in a group, then you can't even argue that Psykos could get outsped or just teleported to or whatever, because she has all these other people just backing her up. So if it's a team battle, I definitely see the Monster Association winning. Now, what could be interesting to talk about is what if Gojo was on the invading team of the heroes when they invade the Monster Association. That could be a fun what if scenario. But at the same time, I feel like Psykos would just come out to face him herself then, and then probably win. But, you know, it could be a fun scenario to talk about at some point.
Yeah, I mean, but she would have a lot of other things to worry about there as well, you know, outside of just Gojo himself.
Gojo and Tatsumaki just both pull up to her.
Yeah, so I'm like, I think that, you know, if you guys want to see that video, make sure to let us know in the comments, because that's something I'd love to do a collab on.
Yeah, but anyways, glad to have you on here. Definitely go check out Sage. He has some JJK content, Naruto content, Avatar content recently. So he covers a variety of topics that I think you'll find interesting. And I appear on his channel too, so, you know, if you just want to go there for me, maybe be my guest. Who knows? No, but for real, go check him out. Go check him out.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, man. It's always a pleasure. I'm looking forward to many more collaborations like this. And if you guys have not subscribed to Satoru, what are you doing? It's right there. You can do it with one click. So make sure to do that as well. But thank you again, man. I look forward to the next one, and hope everybody enjoyed the video.
So glad to have you on here. Thanks for being here. And see you next time. Peace out. Hope you have a good rest of the day.